Scattered or gathered? Scattered or gathered? How was your week? This is the second Sunday of Lent. Last week, the first Sunday, we talked about a piece from William Arthur Ward that is at least 22 years old, perhaps older. And it's called Fast From and Feast On. I'm not going to read the whole thing again. But if you remember, there were certain ideas, certain ways of being that he asked us to consider for Lent. And he said, why don't we fast from judging others and feast on the God who is within each of us? Why don't we fast on our emphasis on differences and feast on our diversity of gifts? Why don't we fast from discontent and feast on gratitude? Why don't we fast from complaining and feast on appreciation? Why don't we fast from self-concern and feast on compassion for others? Remember it? Did you do some feasting this week? We also talked about the father who wished his daughter enough as they were parting for probably the last time in their lives. And he said, I wish you enough happiness to keep your spirit alive. I wish you enough pain so the smallest joys appear larger. I wish you loss so you can appreciate all you have. So this week, scattered or gathered? Are we fasting from being scattered and feasting on being gathered? I'd like to suggest we might be. That might be something we take with us for this week. Or perhaps this, I wish you enough scattering so you can appreciate God's gathering you as a mother hen gathers her chicks, giving them warmth, providing them protection, and enfolding them in love. I had to handwrite everything because the granddaughters are staying in my office, just so you know. Jesus images himself in thus God as a mother hen. There are in Scripture many other feminine images of God. In Deuteronomy 13, we read of the protective mother eagle. In Hosea 13, of the fierce mother bear. In Isaiah 42, a mother giving birth. In Isaiah 49, a mother breastfeeding her child. All images of God. Images of strength and courage. And at the same time, images of vulnerability. Those of us, myself excluded, who were mothers, know that. Those of us who had people in our lives who mothered us know that too. Someone, yourself as mother, or someone who mothered you, both strong and courageous, for anything you needed. And also making herself vulnerable to protect her children. David Luce says there are two types of courage: the immediate and situational. The kind we all fear that happens in the immediate. Somebody rushes through the door, runs up the aisle, and threatens the pastor, and who jumps up first to prevent that from happening? Got situational courage. Y'all are going to jump up, right?
A spendthrift sticks out.
What's that, Mary?
That'd be Sue who will take care of it.
Sue will take care of that? Okay. She's not here
Hope it doesn't
today.
happen today.
She's not here today. What do we do? I'm still waiting for the iron plate to be put in the front of the communion table. It seems spur of the moment, but it's a display of character, David Luce reminds us, an accumulation of traits and beliefs developed and exercised over a lifetime. So the person that jumps in the pond when the car goes in, that's something their whole life has been preparing them for, and they have been preparing themselves for. David Luce says there's a second kind of courage that's displayed in anticipating a significant, daunting, or even frightening challenge. That's Jesus today, this second Sunday of Lent, on his journey back to Jerusalem, where he knows he will die. But he takes it on and doesn't turn away. He faces it and doesn't flinch and go in a different direction. It is a decision that is consciously, deliberately, intentionally made, heading into whatever this is and meeting it head on. This is a pretty challenging gospel for us, because that's the kind of courage we see in today's reading. Do we have the kind of courage that emerges from a lifetime of facing fears, shouldering burdens, accepting challenges and responsibilities that could have been avoided? Do we, as Faith Family United Church of Christ, emerge from lifetimes in this community that we come together and face fears, shoulder burdens, and accept challenges without flinching and avoiding our responsibilities? It's a question we need to ask ourselves communally as well as individually. This week we had somebody who does a lot for us. Mostly behind the scenes, mostly hidden, unspoken, unknown to most of us. A lot of the work of the church. Most of the work of the church. And she's not here today. No matter what I asked her to do, she never said, no, I'm too busy, I've got too much on my plate, I can't do it. It's not to say she always did it as quickly as I wished, but she never said no. I think she has the kind of courage that David Luce is talking about here. And now she needs us. She asks only for our prayer. She's not in a position where she's ready to accept company or visits or phone calls. There's a lot she does each and every week that we still need to get done. I sent an email late this week because I didn't know early this week to two of the people on our accounting team that somewhere in my memory bank I thought had done some entering of stuff into our database. They've been on the team a long time, and they work without most of you knowing who they are. And I said, Linda can't be here Sunday. I know it's late in the week. Can one of you help? And they both wrote back, yeah, we can. Having had further conversation with Shirley and Linda this week, it appears that this is not an issue that's going to resolve itself in the next 24 hours. And so I said to them, can we make a plan for what we need to do each Sunday to take Linda's place in the counting room where she was the mentor and the question answerer. And I didn't give them a chance to answer back. But I'm going to corral them both on the way out the door, and I know we'll make a plan. I trust we'll make a plan. Even if it's not them totally, I know we'll make a plan. I called somebody else yesterday or the day before and said, hey, I got this stuff I need you to do. I know Linda's been helping you learn the position. How about if you take everything on right now in a minute? She didn't say no. I didn't hear back from her for a while. And so we're meeting this Tuesday to figure it out. When it was in the process of getting our tax exempt status granted to us by Hillsborough County, as you may recall, it cost us about $6,000 last year when we could not get that status. I sent an email, I don't know, 4:30, 5 o'clock yesterday morning, something like that. Maybe later, I don't remember. I asked some folks if they could review with me the paperwork. And they did. And we think we're good to go. And I have one more reviewer that has promised to look it over to make sure the rest of us didn't screw it up. Didn't miss something. What we've discovered in this congregation of less than 7 years is that whenever we need something as a church, or whenever one of us needs something individually, this congregation steps up. We had a situation in the early history of the church when one of our day one members was in the hospital for some serious cancer surgery. And he and his partner received so much food, home-cooked food and other kinds of food, so they wouldn't have to worry about food, that when I always help people bring it over, I always wondered why they never asked me in to eat with them. But anyway, they got all this food because that's what this church does. Carolyn Lewis writes, communities of love and belonging are those places and spaces of gathered folks that give you life, nourish your soul, remind you of who you truly are. I'll pick that out of the air because I thought you needed something affirming. No, I picked it because it's us. Or in correct English, it's we. How many do that? Places and spaces of gathered folks that give one another life, nourish one another's souls, remind one another of who we really are, who we truly are, and whose we are. As a transplant into Protestantism, this whole notion of you don't have to go to church every Sunday is relatively new to me. But I come every Sunday that I'm in town because this is where I get nourished and reminded of who I am and whose I am. It's where I come and get strength from others. No matter how limpy and gimpy and sore we show up. We're a community that feasts on God within each other. And we try our darndest, and sometimes we screw this up, to fast on judging each other. But we try. We are a community that feasts on compassion for one another and for so many people beyond our doors. And when we do that, we have to be those who fast on self-concern and self-centeredness. You can't be both. In today's scripture, Jesus images himself as a mother hen. Does that image scare us? Or embolden us to help us see all the possibilities of who God is? This is not new and novel material I'm sharing with you today. It's written in the book of Genesis, where God says, I created you in my image, male and female, I created you. And so many of us, when others speak about God, only as he, feel left out. But we don't do that here. Instead, we have the courage and compassion and love and the fierce protectiveness of the mother hen who gathers those who choose to scatter and to be scattered. Do you remember in the passage we read, the chicks choose to scatter. Jerusalem is the city that Jesus weeps over, because they will not have him come minister to them. Jerusalem is pretty significant in Luke's gospel, which is where we find ourselves today. Luke mentions Jerusalem 90 times. The other three gospel writers together mention Jerusalem 49 times. Luke's gospel begins and ends in Jerusalem. Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. But in today's scripture, so wants to gather the chicks, running around, scattered in Jerusalem. Across the Kidron Valley from Jerusalem on the western slope on the Mount of Olives, you've all been there, right?
Yep.
I haven't, so I'm taking the word of the writer who created this. Sits a small chapel called Dominus Levit. And according to tradition, it was here that Jesus wept over Jerusalem, the city that refused his ministry. Inside the chapel, the altar is centered before a window that looks over the city of Jerusalem. And on the front of that altar is a picture, a mosaic really, of a white hen with a golden halo and wings spread wide to shelter her pale yellow chicks that are at her feet. There are 7 of them. They have black dots for eyes and yellow dots for beaks. They look happy to be there. The hen looks ready to spit fire if anyone comes near her babies. This is the assessment of Barbara Brown Taylor. Some of you know her. But the chicks are never gathered. And the inscription in Latin reads in translation, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children as a hen gathers her brood within her wings, and you were not willing. So it seems to me the choice is ours. Do we want to be scattered or gathered? In the book of the prophet Hosea, God calls to us, and this is a song we sing at communion this Lent. Come back to me with all your heart. Don't let fear keep us apart. Long have I waited for your coming home to me and living deeply our new life. We said last week that Lent is a time to grow closer to God. Clearly, the scripture is saying to us, it's also a time God so wants us to grow closer to God. So will we? Will we grow closer to God by seeing God's face in each other, in all the persons that people our lives? Will we be God's words and hands of compassion and not look elsewhere and ignore people? Will we have the courage to look all our challenges in the eye and remain undaunted and God-centered? And I look at you and I say to God, you bet we will. We're yours.